I want people to become part of the solution by becoming more informed. So part of this show is just listening to the story of the offender and learning from that one experience. But the more important goal of the show is to educate the community, to educate parents, to educate spouses, to educate law enforcement and everyone else involved. Together we can make a difference. And I think watching the show is where it starts. So of the hundreds of sex offenders I've worked with, about 30 to 35% of them have been sexually abused as youngsters. That's a much higher rate than the general population. And I think at the very least what offending against these children they once were involves is kind of an over-sexualization. These children grow up thinking a lot about sex and dealing with sex way before they're emotionally ready. And obviously when you were 6, there's no way you were emotionally ready.
No, there wasn't.
So do you think it maybe affected your life sexually?
I think it may have, because with that happening, I've actually been sexually active since puberty.
Mm-hmm. You mean with consensual partners?
Yes.
And, well, puberty meaning like 12, 13?
Like about 13, 14.
Okay.
I've been sexually active with consensual partners.
And you're a relatively young guy, at least compared to a geezer like myself. So, in your, how many years have you been an adult? Say since 20.
Since 20, 9 years. I'll be 30 in a couple of months.
And how many sexual partners would you guess you might have had in
over 200?
That's more than I do. You have a higher number than I do.
Yeah, well, your IQ outmatches mine, so.
So what do you think about that number? Does that seem high to you, or does it seem like just no big deal?
If I was female, it would be a big problem. But being male, to me, no, it doesn't really seem like a big deal. In society today, it's actually the more, for a lot of guys, the higher the number, the cooler you are.
Right.
So, I guess that's how I've always looked at it.
Looking back on it now as a much older adult man, and you're a father now.
Yes.
Do you think it's a really cool thing?
I think it's stupid. I honestly really wish I would have waited till I actually had gotten married. It would have been a lot more special. It would have actually meant something versus just anything with a hole in a heartbeat.
And what about friends?
I've always been a social butterfly. So, I mean, I've always had a lot of friends around me, a lot of really close friends that would do anything for me. I mean, if I were to accidentally kill someone or hit someone with my car, they're the type of friends that would help me hide the body.
And can I ask you how...
Not that I ever have.
I just want to make it clear that when we talked about your past and you're being sexually abused and your stepfather being an alcoholic and physically abusive as well, you've never blamed your behavior on him or anyone else.
No, because I'm in charge of me.
So what would keep you from committing another sex crime, do you think?
Now, well, you know what they say, like I hear 1,000 times, if I knew then what I know now is the biggest thing. And my family. My family is what keeps me sane and from going back to prison. I do everything I can to stay with my family and my children.
So what if your wife comes to her senses and dumps you the way she should?
I will, no matter what, fight for my children.
Okay, and they grow up and move away and never write home.
By that point, I'm going to be smart enough to know not to do it, and I'm going to make sure I actually have healthy relationships so that I don't put myself in that type of situation again.
I got to ask, I mean, if you could say anything today to people listening to this program, I don't know, maybe one of your children down the road who's wondering how in the heck this happened in Dad's life, or what would you want to say?
Well, being now that my children aren't old enough to know what's going on with me, I'd always tell them that I do love them and I'll always be there for them no matter what. But if I were to tell anybody else, because I'm always open with my family, with my friends about my crime, even my bosses, though I'm not required to tell them anything. My bosses know everything, and they just laugh at it because they see me as the type of person that would not do anything like that. And that's a problem, is because I did do it. And for everybody to tell me that, well, you would have never do anything like that, and the fact that I did, I'm not sure what that says about me or what that says about them.
It kind of says they're in denial, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would think so.
And I don't. Isn't that because they think sex offenders
They
have
when
to
you
be the
tell-
worst of the worst?
When you can get in a sex crime for urinating on a sidewalk versus when you tell somebody I'm a sex offender, they automatically think you're a baby raper, you're a child molester. They never look at the thousands of other crimes that you could have been arrested for.
Yeah, I think that right now that maybe there's so much hate towards sex offending and sex offenders in particular that maybe if somebody likes a guy who has a sex offense in his past, well then mentally they do this little gymnastics that says,
Well, it's okay because it was this, or
he wouldn't have, I just know him, he would never have done something like that. But doesn't that blind us to the people around us who are at risk for committing sex crimes?
it really does. And I think this show is a good start to helping people understand that there's a lot more to it than just child molestation.
What kind of things should someone be looking for that would show them, hey, I'm at risk for doing the same thing this guy did. I'm not that different from him.
Well, in my situation, my fiance at the time was working days and I was working nights, so I was at home bored all the time. So I would turn to my computer. And so if you're doing that and turning the computer and starting to chat with people, could be a big determining factor, at least in my situation.
Was it the computer and the internet, or was it the internet plus the loneliness?
I believe it was the internet plus just being alone all day.
You got all these requirements, right? You can't go to malls.
I can't go anywhere where
can't-
children congregate. I can't be in secluded environments with anybody under the age of 18, except as directed by my supervising officer,
You have
which
to
I'm
meet-
allowed to be with my children.
You have to meet with your officer.
I have to meet with my officer all the
regularly.
time, every
He gets
month.
to search your house whenever he wants.
My house, my vehicle. He could, if he even got a wild hair up his butt, he could even come to my job, which I've been lucky that he hasn't. Even though my bosses already know, but the customers there don't know.
Some people would argue that maybe understanding how your abuse you suffered as a child affected you might be a big part of stepping away from future criminality.
That would probably definitely help. However, I've never brought it up before.
And you don't talk about it in group.
I don't talk about it in my group. I don't even talk about it with my wife, my brother, or my sister. In fact, today is the first time I've ever brought it up in any situation.
Now, I got to ask, if despite all your best efforts and all the protection that you offer your own family, God forbid, let's say somebody at some time molested one of your own children.
I would kill them.
Of course. But would you want that child of yours thinking that they shouldn't talk about it because it's about them and it's something to
No.
be embarrassed of?
I would want them to be able to discuss it with me, be open with me about it.
Yeah, so maybe someday you're
I
supposed
never
to
said
figure
my
out,
way was the right way. It's just the way I was raised. It's the way I've always known.
Right.
I never said it was the right way.
Well, I'm thinking
And
maybe
it's just, and being in counseling is probably, when it comes just as a question as what it's done for me, it's hard to come up with it right off the top of my head, but counseling has probably also helped me knowing that that's not the right way.
you know that's an irrational belief.
Yes,
that
definitely.
For you to feel embarrassed means you somehow take responsibility for the behavior.
That I'm the one that brought it on myself.
Yeah, and as a young child, you are being victimized is somehow your fault.
Right.
Yeah, and you know that's not true.
Of course.
But
But doesn't mean that's not how I
you
think.
believe it up here, but this part isn't buying it.
They're not talking to each other.
Right.
My heart and my head don't talk very often.
That might be something to explore later in therapy. Hey, I want to thank you for being here.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.